Hello and welcome to the story of Pace Haven Maze. This is the ultimate Animal Crossing maze that I built last year in August, and I just wanted to give you a behind-the-scenes look at what the game is like and what the maze, how it was built, and kind of my thought process and creative process behind this whole maze. This right here is one of my favorite areas of the maze called Atori Mountain. And it is very, very, very fun to sit and hang out here. And this is a good place to start the story because this was the very first piece of land that I terraformed in this game. Let me tell you a little bit about that. So, on my very first day in Animal Crossing, I was right here. This was my tent on my island in Animal Crossing, Pace Haven. And you can see already, if you've seen the Animal Crossing videos and the maze videos, which, by the way, this will contain some spoilers for those. If you've seen those videos, you might already begin to recognize a few features of this island that made it into the maze. Because one of my ideas for building this maze was I wanted to build it around a lot of the existing structure of the island. And that's one of the ways that I built the maze. So I have right here a picture of the original layout of my island. And some of you may actually have had this layout on your island. I've already met one other person who had this exact layout. And this is basically what I kept as I was playing through Animal Crossing. And if we look at the... Again, spoiler alert. If we look at the picture of my maze right now, you can start to see some of the similarities. Okay, we've got the two rivers coming from the bottom and meeting somewhere around the middle, and a waterfall up above. And I can show you where that is right now here in game. As long as we just hop right across here, in through the maze. With that, there we go. This right here is the waterfall. The very same waterfall that I built my tent in front of in the very beginning of Animal Crossing New Horizons. And once again, you can kind of see that here. On the very first day that I unlocked terraforming in this game, I had kind of built this peninsula for my house. And right up behind me, you can see that same waterfall, and even the bridge is under construction there. And so that became what came to be known as Macna Falls on my island. Right here. So the first day, again, that I unlocked terraforming, I had already imagined for myself this area. It was a mountain with an island in a lake on top of the mountain at the source of the water. And that is what I really wanted to build, and that's the first thing I built. And I really liked this area so much. It was a lot of fun to hang out in. Let me show you what it looked like originally. Right here, this is the original Satori Mountain. And it was just a place for me to sit and hang out with my friends. Because I loved hanging out with my friends in Animal Crossing. And so what I did was I wanted to make it kind of like a secret clubhouse. So I surrounded the entire mountain with this single layer thick of water to prevent players from being able to climb up here. That way, the only way you could get up to Satori Mountain was by taking the secret entrance. And that secret entrance was pretty simple at first. All you had to do was to hop across these pillars. But I did that, and I got all the way to the other side of the island, and I thought, maybe I can make it even more sinister. I'll make it so you have to hop behind the pillars just to get onto the pillars. And if you've played or seen the original maze, then that's what you would have encountered. And then I had also, on my first day of terraforming, I had built this heart pond that you see right here. And I thought, okay, what if you had to go behind the heart pond as well? I'll go this way instead. What if you had to go behind the heart pond as well? And after I did that, I built an elaborate series of jumps and hops and hidden features that you'd have to do in order to get into the secret entrance to my clubhouse that was Atori Mountain. And then at that point, I realized that what I had really been building was not just a secret entrance to a clubhouse, but it was a maze. And so I decided I was going to go ahead and make it a maze. And that's when I built this feature right here, which was the maze entrance. Now, the maze entrance looks like a maze, and it feels like a maze, but this was actually a fake out. It was the fake maze of Pacehaven Island, where in order to get into the actual maze, in order to get into the actual secret entrance to Atori Mountain, you had to bypass this fake maze altogether and slip in behind the tree that you see over there on the left. And that was the only way to get in. And that ended up being kind of fun. I had a lot of fun with players trying to find their way into that area in the original Pacehaven Maze 1.0. And so shortly after that, I also built 2 more puzzles in order to round out the maze. The first puzzle was the one here on the left, which came to be known eventually as Fossil Canyon. Just a simple maze. And then I also built this one. This was the infamous Fire Maze, and eventually became to be known as Guardia Prison. And that one down there is all about hopping and hidden obstacles, and it was the hardest maze that I was able to design at the time. This was back, once again, in early April, or maybe even late March of 2020, just after the game came out, within a week of terraforming being unlocked for me without time travel. That was the hardest maze that I was able to design at the time, and it was a lot of fun to make it. And ended up being a lot of frustration, but also a lot of fun for players. One of my playtesters actually, you can see right up there behind my watermark, where it says HDude on the screen, you can see an opening in the fence. And that was not originally there. That whole area there was originally not actually part of the maze. It was only there for decoration. However, one of the people who was playtesting the maze for me said quite a few times that they felt like that was the place where they had to go. And so because they were saying that, I realized, hey, wait a minute, that could be a really, really good dead end. And so even though I had never actually intended to put a dead end here, it ended up being a really great final challenge for a lot of players to figure out where they were supposed to go and where they weren't supposed to go. But this whole maze works on a principle that the player is not able to jump over items or fences, even if they are on a lower area. So you can't hop between this pillar behind me and this pillar behind me because of the sign item down there. Now, unfortunately, that was eventually changed by Nintendo, and that's why the maze can't really be completed anymore as usual. But at that time, it worked perfectly, and that is how Pacehaven Maze came to be. That's when I started recording Pacehaven Maze attempts with different streamers. I had something like 24 different streamers do my original maze. And let me show you a map of that original maze and what the island looked like at the time. Here it is with just the north coast. Those few blocks there in the north coast made up the maze. And it was a lot of fun. This was Pacehaven Maze 1.0. You can see my name right there written in waterfalls, and I'll show you a little bit more of that later. But it was a beautiful maze. It was a lot of fun. I'm not going to actually say a beautiful maze. It wasn't really decorated or anything. It was just a maze. And it was fun. And I had a lot of fun making it. And I put together a short video and with highlights from various streamers doing it. And it was a great way to start out Animal Crossing for me. But you can see that most of my island at this point is not a maze at all. It's, I mean, about a quarter of it is my town, and about a quarter of it is the maze, and the rest of it is just completely empty, except for, you know, some trees or things like that. And it was a couple months later, after that video came out, that I came back to this game and decided that I wanted to try to build the best maze that I could possibly build. I wanted to go all out and make the best island on Animal Crossing that I could possibly make. And so when that time came, I started brainstorming, and I thought, okay, this was the beginning of August in 2020. I hadn't actually played the game in 2 months at the time, but I wanted to come back, and how was I going to make this the best maze that I could possibly make? Well, for one thing, I wanted to start way at the bottom right side of the island, and for that to be the entrance of the island, and I wanted to wrap all the way around the east coast, the north coast, and the west coast to make it really, really long. So basically, that's exactly what I did. And so when we get back into the game, here we go. This is... I'll show you where I am on... Nope, not that way. I'll show you where I am on the island. I'm on the southeast corner of the island, just before crossing the bridge, and that is, of course, the beginning of the maze. And this area here, you might recognize as being the same fake maze as that we had in Maze 1.0. Again, I'll show you that maze. And the new version of this maze is literally just the same pieces of terraforming, and it's rotated 90 degrees and brought down into the beginning of the new maze, because I liked that beginning. I liked that fake out at the start, and I wanted it to be a part of here. And then I discovered that you could climb down this. And I didn't have any way to block it. And I didn't have any way to prevent the player from doing it. So I realized that it could be, rather than having this side be the fake or the real entrance and having this be the real entrance, I made this the fake entrance. I made this the fake entrance. And I made this the real start, the real solution to the first part of the maze. So that was a lot of fun. Once I had built that and kind of moved it over, I deconstructed the fake maze from where its original area, because I wasn't able to move it, so I recreated it down here, and then I removed it from up there. Kind of a copy and paste sort of thing. And then I built the Lost Woods. And the Lost Woods was somewhat complicated to make, but not overly so. It was a lot of fun, though. Basically, what I did was I came in here, and I planted all the trees on the west side of my island, which was completely empty at the time. And then I put down all of the paths and all of the hedges in this area as the trees were growing. And so I was able to kind of figure out a layout, figure out a path that I wanted for the maze and where it was going to go. Originally, the plan was to make it so that the Lost Woods would start down here and it would come out up here where the Lost Woods sign is. But I decided to change my mind just because the island layout ended up making more sense another way. I should note that none of this maze was really planned out. I mean, I had a vague idea of where I wanted to start and where I wanted to end, but none of these puzzles were planned out before I started building. Each one of these times that I got into a new area, I kind of just sectioned off the area and started building to see whatever kind of whatever kind of puzzle would come out of it. And that's exactly what I did with the Lost Woods. I ended up changing my mind on things all the time. I ended up experimenting, a lot of trial and error. And eventually, that's the Lost Woods that I ended up with. Actually, one more thing to talk about with the Lost Woods that I forgot to mention is that there are 2 different types of paths down here. So, it's actually really, really fun. If you... I'm not sure how well you can hear. I'll stop talking for a moment. But if I ever step off the path, if I ever step off the correct path to get from the start of this area to the finish of this area, the sound of my footsteps changes because I'm walking on sand now instead of walking on wooden planks. And so it is possible, and not every player noticed this, but it is possible to solve that maze, or that section of the maze, just by audio cues alone. You could literally do it blindfolded. It's very fun. So then this takes us to the Green Hill Zone, and this is another area where I just started building. I just started building things randomly, and I was still, in a lot of ways, learning the mechanics of the game, and movement, and the rules behind, okay, which parts of, when can you climb up a diagonal cliff, and when can you not? And so this is kind of just a representation of that experimentation that I made to figure out how to get around in this game. And I ended up having a lot of fun with that. It was informative, and I ended up going with this pattern that Arlinia, of all people, really, really caught on to. I don't know why I said of all people, but Arlinia in particular really caught on to, which is that if you send a player through one area on a lower level or an upper level, and then you send them back through it a second time on a different level, you can reuse the same area more than once. And so that kind of became a template or a pattern for how I designed this maze. And this jump here, don't pay too much mind to that. That wasn't actually possible in the maze when it was built. Again, there have been software patches to Animal Crossing that change what kind of jumps you can make and what kind of directions you can go. So I'm just taking this little shortcut for myself. And again, that was just something that would bring the player over here to Cheep Cheep Beach so that they could go back through the Lost Woods and then back up to the top of Green Hill Zone. And I should mention that the reason this is called Green Hill Zone was mainly because it was green and I didn't want to decorate it. So I decided I was going to turn it into a Sonic reference rather than come up with a whole new theme for this area. And, just adding a couple of Windflower fans made things pretty nice. And this is another hop that isn't supposed to be possible, but because of the software patch, I'm able to take a shortcut here. So after the Green Hill Zone, of course, if you've seen the videos, the player has to come back down here, and they have to climb up behind CJ here. Let's see if I can get behind him. And that takes them back to the original fake maze. But instead of going forward through the maze, like the player would have assumed originally, they had to come back through here and go backward through the fake maze. And that was just a little thing that I added to not make it entirely original. To not make it entirely old. So if the player got back here, and they climb up this was a lot of fun to make. And then that will take them to Pinna Park. You might notice that this is actually in kind of keeping with the theme of building around what I already had. This museum was completely unmoved from the original position. Like on day 3 or day 2 of playing this game, this is exactly where I placed the museum. And I like the fact that so much of my island is built around my early Animal Crossing experience with this game. And so that being able to keep some of those features really makes it special to me. And then this area here was something I built much later in the process. I left this completely empty because I didn't really know how to fill it at the time. So instead I moved on. I did kind of a redecorating of the original maze. And I built some more areas I went ahead and I moved my campsite to back behind what became the Golden Forest. And at that time is when I realized, as I was building this Golden Forest area, that it was not possible to climb up a space. I mean, the ladders, if I move the ladder over half a space, then you'd be able to see this. But you weren't able to climb up a space that wasn't in the middle of a tile. So essentially, it made it impossible to climb up, even if there was enough space for you to fit in between two items, then you wouldn't be able to climb up in between them unless you were actually centered. So here I pushed it over half a space and I'm able to climb. And then here, once again, this is where I discovered this principle and this game mechanic right here, was trying to get up in between this log and that lantern. And I was so confused. Why didn't it work? Why couldn't you get up here? And when I figured it out, that's when I finally had the inspiration to go back and do Pin a Park. And if you've seen the Pin a Park video, then you will know that being able to climb up in between those things is pretty complicated. But again, it works on the same principle that as long as the spacing in between the items is centered on a tile, you can climb. But if it's not centered, you can't climb, which is why you can climb on this space, but not the spaces above it or below it. Other places that I designed around this time was the Golden Forest. Golden Forest was a lot of fun to design because I had in mind pretty early one particular puzzle that I was going to make. And that was the puzzle where you have to sit on the logs. For the most part, the logs in this area are just obstacles. In fact, the first time you come through this, there is no possible time when you can sit on a log. All you can do is see them and see that they're blocking your path. And that kind of, for the player, gives them the impression that maybe this is more of a fence or more of an obstacle rather than actually being a bench, because they don't look like a bench, and you couldn't necessarily say for sure that they were a bench unless you already knew that. And so the first time the player comes through here, it kind of prepares them mentally for not recognizing those logs as a bench. Even this was a bench at one point, but I removed it so the player wouldn't accidentally sit on it. That way, the second time they come through this area and they see the bench that they have to sit on, they won't recognize it that way, and it kind of adds to the puzzle overall. And after that, of course, they get to Satori Mountain, and this, of course, was the finish line of the original maze, of Maze 1.0. And it was a lot of fun to kind of turn it into a rest stop and make it so that these pillars that you had to jump across in order to get to the finish line in the first maze were reversed, so that instead of jumping from left to right in order to get to Satori Mountain, instead you would jump across these from right to left. But I still managed to keep all the pillars in. All these pillars, again, were here initially on the first day that I unlocked terraforming. And I love keeping those elements of the island in my maze, even after all the work that I've put into it. Keeping parts of it the same was half the fun. So once I got through that area, I'm going to, rather than going all the way through Golden Forest myself, I'm just going to kind of take a couple of shortcuts here to make things easy. There was an area in Golden Forest that got broken, and this was actually really surprising to me because I had playtested this really, really hard, and I wasn't sure how it could be broken. So essentially the idea was, there was a game mechanic that even after building this for 200 hours, I was not aware of, that was accidentally discovered by a few of the participants who went through this maze. And let me show you to you right about now if I can manage to get myself across here. Nope, not that way. Hold on. This should only take a moment. There we go. Okay, so in the game, there is very few times when you actually need to sprint in order to get from one place to another. So right now, oh, well, that didn't work. But anyways, before the patch, there was very few ways that places that you could sprint in order to get from one place to the other. Almost all the time, the only thing you had to do was walk. And so that hop that I just made was normally impossible. However, if you held down the B button to sprint, it was possible to kind of push yourself forward into it, and then you could skip that whole section. And so right now I think it should be blocked again. And so originally I had this log kind of pushed over this way, and so I actually had two different streamers break the maze this way by accidentally making that jump and not knowing which way they were supposed to go. One of them, the first time it happened, I assumed it was just a network error because I had play tested this, I had tried it myself, I tried it again afterwards, and I wasn't able to recreate it. And then the second time it happened, I knew, okay, something is wrong here, there's something I don't understand, and that's when I discovered how sprinting into a corner could make it possible to jump from different angles. So that was an experience and a learning experience, and it goes to show just how much there is to learn about a game, even a simple game as this, when it comes to the movement and to the mechanics. And after all the playtesting I had done, there were still ways that players were able to break the maze. But I am proud to say that's the only way. That was the only time that the maze was broken after playtesting. So that was very, very fun to experience. One more thing to note in this area of Golden Forest is that these green mums took a long, long time to breed. My friend James and I, we spent a lot of time on his island. He donated like half of his island, or maybe more than half of his island, just for breeding flowers. And I knew I wanted green mums in this area, and he was very gracious and happy to help with those. And it was a lot of fun to make those. And speaking of flowers, all these flowers here were also bred on James's island, so that was really, really cool. Now this area at Macna Falls, like I said before, that is the kind of the same bridge that I built on the same day that I got terraforming, and you know, this is the same, once again, the same waterfall that I had behind my house here, very, very early on in the game. And I didn't actually have a puzzle to put here. All I had was a bunch of empty space, and this was water. There were no hop rocks, there was no pillars, and so I decided to put these in just as a way of filling in space. Because by that point I was feeling that the maze was getting long enough, and I didn't want to make it necessarily much longer than it already was. So I put these hop rocks around here because it was fun. And then I realized that it was so fun to hop across these that the player would not notice little things along the way. And Dazabound was one of the people who really, really picked up on this. How in hopping across these pillars, there's a pattern that gets embedded into the player's mind of what they're supposed to do. They just want to keep hopping because it's fun to hop across these pillars. And that brings them down below. And of course, if you've seen the videos, you know that everything down below there is all a dead end. And the real way that you're supposed to go is hidden in plain sight right here in this grass. And almost without fail, I will say without fail, every player hopped past this. Nobody saw this the first time they came through, despite the fact that it's right out in the open. And not every player actually went down into the Hop Rocks area of Macna Falls, but every player hopped past this without seeing it the first time. And definitely getting a pattern embedded into your brain is exactly what happened, and Dazabound really picked up on that. And then here is my name in Waterfalls. You can see over there is the A, the G, the E, etc. You could see earlier that I did have this waterfall name in my on my island when the original maze existed. It wasn't actually part of the maze per se, but I had designed it, and I can show you again. Here it was up there where Golden Forest is now. And a little bit less impressive with the flowers, and that just kind of goes to show just how much of a difference it made to have James's Island open for flower breeding and bringing all these different types and different breeds and different colors of flowers in here. That was really, really nice. That was a really big upgrade for the whole town. And I will also mention that this is one of my favorite parts of the island because it's the first part that I see every day when I log in. Here's my house right here, and every day, or every time that I play this game, I start out right here, and those falls are the first thing I see when I start up the game. I think they're really pretty, and I'm really, really happy to have them here. And there is a little subtle hint of climbing down here, and that is these lilies of the valley, this one flower that you can only get when you get a 5-star island. I thought that would be a really cool subtle hint for where the right place was to climb down to get back here, which takes you back up on top of the bridge. And you might think that the next section is the quarry mine, but as a matter of fact, it is not. I did not make the quarry mine next. The quarry mine is actually something that I decided to save for last. Hold on, why can't I hop across here? There we go. The quarry mine is something I decided to save for last because I was intimidated by the idea. I kind of knew that I wanted that puzzle to be the hardest puzzle in the entire maze. And in general, the maze wasn't built to be as hard as it could possibly be. It was built to be as fun as it could possibly be. But this one section, I decided I was going to make it very hard. And so making a very hard puzzle actually takes a lot of effort, and a lot of brain power, and I had a lot of headaches trying to get to that. So I just put it aside at the time, and I came here to build Romani Ranch. And Romani Ranch kind of came about as an idea because this was shortly after dream addresses were first available in the game, actually. And so all the dream addresses that I had seen that included a couple of mazes involved things like, you know, finding a shovel so that you could dig up certain holes, or finding a ladder so that you could climb up things. And I really wanted to stick to the same format as my original maze. So the player would get a ladder at the very start, and that's all they would get to use. And so I tried to make it as hard as I could while still being fair, but finding new and creative ways to make it difficult. And I wanted to find something that you could only do with multiplayer that you wouldn't be able to do with a dream address. And so I came up with a few ideas for that. The first idea was, of course, taunting. There's a reason why this is the first emote that I got on Twitch, and I'm going to keep it forever because it's just so funny. It's just so funny. I love laughing at the players who come through the maze. I love making fun of them. I love taunting them. It's a lot of fun. Second thing I thought of was, well, I mean, another thing is I could explain the rules, right? And I could give hints. All of those things that I could do were kind of unique to multiplayer that you couldn't do in a dream address. But having a final boss was the best idea, the favorite idea that I had was including a final boss fight into the maze. And because I'm a speedrunner, I thought, hey, let's make it a race. So there are two paths that go through Romani Ranch. This is my path that goes to the right, and it diverges a little bit. At the start of this path, they mirror each other, so the player can tell that we're racing, and they can kind of see where they're supposed to go by following me. But at this next point, right here, they diverge, where I climb down and the player hops across those pillars instead. And one of the reasons I did this was so that I could make my path slightly slower than my opponents in this one. And it was a lot of fun to do that. And I tested them out. I actually wasn't sure whether my path would be on the left or whether my path would be on the right. I basically just built both paths, and then I timed them out to see which one took longer. And this one here on the right took a little tiny bit longer, and so that's the path that I would take, and I would let the participants take the slightly shorter path. That way, if they did it correctly and they did it quickly, then they would always win. That being said, I've never had anyone manage to beat me on the first try or the second try, although a few came close. The third try was the best that anyone did. And that was the end of the maze. I visited all the streams that I wanted to, and I invited players to come and visit my island, and 16 of them did. And that was the most fun that I've had with this game by far, was having those players on my island. You can see who all of those players are if you watch the Ultimate Animal Crossing Maze video, or the 6-part video, whichever format you want to watch it in. Those 16 streamers and I had so much fun on this island. It was amazing. And after that, there was a little bit of a challenge in making the video, because I had 43 hours of footage, and from 16 different videos that I kind of had to splice together to make this Animal Crossing video. But the video itself, I will definitely say, was more of a scrapbook, or more of a diary of my experiences and my memories of doing the maze with all of those great streamers. And I really am really happy with the memories that I was able to preserve through that. And I think whether or not a lot of people watch that video, I'm going to continue watching that video years into the future, because it brings back a lot of good memories, and I made a lot of good friends through this way, through this Animal Crossing experience. So I'm going to kind of leave off here by just looking at the map again, and you can see all the areas. If you look at this, you can see the path that goes through the maze, although it's not that easy to follow on this map. You'd have to see the end of the Ultimate Animal Crossing Maze video to see the red line that goes through it. But the maze was a lot of fun. Building the maze was fun. What the most fun that I had was definitely the experiences and the fun that I had with the streamers that came through here. So that's the story of the Ultimate Animal Crossing Maze, the story of Pace Haven Island. And if you have any more questions about the maze, I mean, it took me a couple 100 hours to build altogether. But if you have any more questions about the maze, let me know in the comments. And if you would ever like to come and visit the maze, even though it can't be solved as an island anymore, feel free to reach out to me through DMs or any other method. All right. Thank you for watching. Have yourself a wonderful day.